So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. As is our practice, we dedicate the learning that we do to the release of our brothers and sisters who are being held captive. Unfortunately, the current number is 124, and the number keeps going down, but not because they've been released or rescued. We also hope that in the zchut of our learning, there is a refuah shlema to all the pitzuim, all our brave soldiers who have been wounded on the field of battle, and certainly in the ongoing operations in the north and the south, the safety for our chayalim as they continue their mission, and what could be the most dangerous part of the war to date. And we hope that the zchut of our learning will go for the safety of Achenu B'nai Yisrael, in all parts of the world who are truly in danger. And we hope that we gain protection from our enemies and our friends, and that we see a swift victory over Amalek to the south, Amalek to the east, B'yachad Ninatzeach. So we continue our learning of Shaar HaBitachon, which I hope we can complete this afternoon and start the next Shaar next week, which is Shaar Yichud HaMaaseh, the unity of action. And we'll talk more about that next week. And I say the learning of Shaar HaBitachon and not simply reading it, because Musar is different than any other types of Torah learning or Torah that we engage in. When it comes to Tehillim or to Tefillah, we get schar, we get rewarded by reciting them. Simply saying the words brings us a level of reward from the Kadosh Baruch Hu, even if we don't understand the words, right? There is a power in the recitation. The Gemara in Masechet Sotah says that Shema can be said in any language, whether you understand it or not. But there's a difference between reading Musar and learning Musar. So unlike davening or reading Tehillim, Musar you can't simply read. You need to integrate the learning into your day-to-day lives, and that requires understanding. So they tell the story of a Bachor who was in the Kelm Yeshiva. Kelm was one of the great Musar yeshivot in Europe, and the altar of Kelm, right, the Mashgiach Ruchani, those who were tending to the moral and the midot of the boys, saw one particular Bachar who was not behaving as he should. And the altar, or what's called in Hebrew the Saba, the grandfather of Kelm, called him into his office, and in a very gentle way, he explained to him that he needed to change his ways. And on releasing the boy, he watched him for a few weeks, and he found in the end that there was no change to his behavior. So he called him back into the office, and he said to him almost the exact thing, word for word. And the butler said, you know what, I've heard this book. And the Sabra Kelm says, well, if you're in the middle of the street and you're blocking traffic, and they're honking their horns at you, do you turn around and say, no, I hear what you're saying? Or do you get out of the street? Right? It's not to listen, it's for action. The essence of Musar is to move. So this Shaar is really the first one we have learned where it demands action on our part. And you will see how later in the Shaar, but for now we're just going to finish the last two items we were discussing. And as we have with the beginning of each of these, right, we have to go over our mantra. The mantra of Bitachon are three things. Everything emanates from Hashem, and everything is part of His plan. Everything He does has our best interests at heart, and He knows what is best for us. Now, we said we have a responsibility of hishtadlut. We have things that we need to do. But in essence, those three things constitute bitachon in our lives. And if you recall, before we took our break for Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom HaZikaron, we were in the middle of a discussion of 7 areas in our lives that demand us to demonstrate our bitachon to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And we said that according to the Chovot HaLevavot, while these are the most common areas, they're not the only. So to review them, they are matters that pertain to our physical health and well-being, meaning our physical bodies, matters that pertain to how we earn a living and how we sustain ourselves, bitachon in situations that involve others or the lack thereof. We talked about isolation, family, friends, colleagues, and the opposite. Next comes the idea of reward in this world. As a result of my keeping mitzvot, both of the heart and the limbs, but only that pertain to me. And we talked about lighting candles. We talked about putting on tefillin as examples. Next is reward in this world that comes from my keeping mitzvot that are dependent on somebody else. And that's giving truma and meiser, he gave as an example. But the one that is more open to us is giving tzedakah, right? That we need somebody else. So we talked about how we have bitachon. The last 2 have to do with reward in the world to come. So 6 is having bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu, where there is reward due to us in Olam Haba, commensurate with the mitzvot that we do in this world. And the 7th that we're going to spend some time on is having bitachon in Hashem, where we will be rewarded. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to give us reward far beyond what we earned in this world, and he does it only due to chasdei Hashem, only because the Kadosh Baruch Hu is a noten. He gives, and he wants us to have. So we had gotten up to the 6th area, then the one next to last, and we took a detour. Specifically, the Chovot HaLevavot wanted to discuss this whole idea of reward in Olam Haba. And he brought it up because nowhere does it say in the Torah that there's any Olam Haba, or that there is any reward that's associated with Olam Haba. So he gave us 6 reasons why this might be so, right? And we covered most of them. And just as a review, first he said that we are physical beings, and he asks, how can physical being fully understand the possibility or the substance of what a spiritual reward is, right? How can we really grasp things that are beyond our understanding? We can only really understand things that we can feel or sense with our 5 senses. So the Torah, according to this idea, didn't tell us about spiritual rewards because there was no point. Second, he pointed out that not everything we need to know is in the Torah. That along with the Torah at Sinai, that we'll be discussing on Shavuot, came the Torah Shebial Peh, the way to understand the Torah. I mean, one of the ways that it has been described, and I kind of like it, is that, at least in the United States, when you did not want to really study in high school, what you got was something called Cliff Notes. So what Cliff Notes were a summary of the course, and they hit the high points, but it didn't give you the details, and you just hoped that you could get enough out of these Cliff Notes that you would understand. But really to understand, you need the whole course, right? And that's what the Torah is. The Torah is Cliff Notes, and the details comes b'Torah shebi'al peh. And as a result, the reason it was done that is because the Torah is designed to be taught from teacher to student. So one, the teacher could see comprehension, and the student can ask questions, right? Because just having a text is one of the clearest ways to create misunderstanding. So The other idea, the third one, is while we know the Torah is lidorot, it is for every generation, and it is eternal, it was also given to a specific generation, the generation that came out of Egypt, and they had specific backgrounds and needs. And we were not at that time ready for these kind of ethereal ideas. So the Kadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm going to leave that to future generations to introduce this idea when Klal Yisrael is ready. Okay, Ad Kan. That is what we had covered. So let's look at the last three reasons why the Torah doesn't mention reward or Olam Haba. And I just want to tell you why he's bringing this, or at least why I think he's doing this now. So just as a reminder, when we learned the introduction, Ibn Pakuda based his presentation and based his understanding of Musar on three pillars: on the Tanakh, on the Torah Shebial Peh, and on intellectual reason. Right? It's the other way around. It's reason, and then proof text, and then Torah Shebial Peh. Right now, when you're talking about reward, he doesn't have the second pillar to support him. So he needs to introduce to us that we will understand intellectually and according to the Masorah. Why? Because he wants you to know why this second pillar is missing from his triumvirate. So the fourth pillar, the fourth reason that he brings, I'll be honest with you, is kind of hard for me to fully understand. So the HaLevavot says that one reason the reward for mitzvot are not spelled out in the Torah is because the reward is not just a function of performing the mitzvah, he says, itself. He says that there are two additional components. One is obviously the mitzvah, and the other is a characteristic of the reward. Let me explain. In terms of the additional component of mitzvah performance that will engender reward, if you look at source one, it says, rather he is deemed by God worthy of it due to two things beside his good deeds, besides just executing the mitzvot. One, that he teaches other people the service of God and he guides them to do good. And when the industrious man will combine the reward for those who he brought merit with the reward for his own good deed and reward for the faith in his heart and the patient acceptance of God's will, he will be deemed by the Creator worthy of the reward in Olam Haba. So you got to ask yourself your question, why is that? Why is it that I don't get the reward just for doing the mitzvah, but I have to go out and make sure that other people do the mitzvot? And then in the zechut of my mitzvah performance and their mitzvah performance, I get reward. The reason I find this hard to understand is that it's a component of my actions. Maybe this is part of the general understanding that was put in Parsha a couple of weeks ago, where it says in Parshat Kedoshim, Lo tisneh et achicha b'levavecha, hochiach tulchiach et amitecha, v'lo tisa alav chet. Right? That you shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall certainly rebuke your friend, and you will not bear a sin on his account. That somehow I am responsible not only for my mitzvah performance, but for the mitzvah performance of all of Klal Yisrael, because we look at ourselves as a team, and mitzvah performance is the result of everybody who performs it. Now, our rabbis are very, very clear in terms of parameters in terms of doing that. And it's not simply yelling at people. It's not saying things to people if they're not going to listen. Right? There are parameters when we can and when we can't. But ultimately, we are responsible for our performance as a people. So yes, we have a responsibility to gently, like the Sabra of Kelm did, right, in a way that will be accepted. Right? So we have a concept that's called Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh. Everybody is responsible for everybody else, which means that we're one team, and our mitzvahs are presented to the Kadosh Baruch Hu as a team. And it really doesn't help the team if I am the high scorer on a losing effort. But maybe if we put this idea in the context of the next part of what Chovot HaLevavot tells us, it will make a little bit more sense. And that is, any schar we receive is not really the result of what we do. If God were to pay a person strictly according to what he has earned, no one would deserve a reward. And as a result, the fact that we will receive, right, after all, this section is all about HaBitachon, that the reward is only due to Hashem's chesed. So he goes on in section 3, he says, the reason for this is that even if a man's good deeds are numerous like the sands of the seashore, it would not weigh enough to cover even one favor that the Creator has bestowed upon him in this world. All the more so if he has committed any sins, because the Creator, the Ribono Shel HaOlam, will hold a man strictly accountable for his obligations of gratitude. All of his good deeds would be canceled and wiped out even by the smallest favor the Creator has done for him, and for that which the Creator owes him will not amount to anything. Hence, that which the Creator rewards a person for his good deeds is to be regarded as divine grace to him. So the reward that we receive is disproportionate to what we do. And if it's disproportionate to what we do, it obligates us to do more. So it's not just doing more mitzvot, but how we do it and how we participate in his global scheme. And he says the punishment in both worlds, however, is through truth and justice, and is a debt that man must pay. Here too, the Creator's loving kindness extended in both worlds. So it seems to say that it wasn't in the Torah, because if they were going to describe it in the Torah, it would sound like a quid pro quo. You do this mitzvah, you get this reward. And that's not how it works, apparently. So the fifth idea. Earlier we said, and this is I find this perhaps the most interesting idea, that the Torah does talk about mitzvah rewards in this world for mitzvah performance, right? That's the Bahaya im Shemoah, the second paragraph of the Shema. And we said then that it allowed us to grow spiritually, meaning that, as Josh had said earlier, right, we got these rewards as a way for us to understand the idea of reward. And then as we grow spiritually, we begin to grow beyond the M&Ms that we receive in this world. And we understand that there are greater, more significant rewards that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to give us in Olam Haba. So that's what we said. Here, he says something different. He reminds us that there are two categories of mitzvot. And we know them now. Those are the limbs, the doing mitzvot. The example I always bring is taking the lulav and etrog. And the Chovot HaLevavot, the emotional mitzvahs, loving God, etc. But he adds an overlay to them. He says that these can also be classified as revealed and concealed. The revealed mitzvot are the mitzvot that everybody can see. Everybody can see if you lit candle. Everybody can see if you put on tefillin. Everybody can see if you show up in minyan. Not everybody can see if you truly love the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That is something only he can see. And what he says here is that the mitzvot in the Torah for this world are for the mitzvot of the limbs, are the mitzvot that we do every day, right? Giving tzedakah and things that are manifest. But the mitzvot in the world to come are those that of the emotional mitzvot. Those are the ones that between us and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And he says it's not written in the Torah because you can't describe that, right? We spent so far, this is I think the 20th Shaar in Chovot HaLevavot. We're now going to finish the 4th of 10 Shaarim. And to put that into a succinct way to try and explain it to people requires that there's a growth and an instruction that goes with it as well. He said that the idea of revealed and concealed have corresponding rewards and punishments, and the punishments are obviously according to the Averot, and the mitzvot of the limbs are rewarded and punished in this world. Okay. And he actually cites a pasuk in Dvarim, if you look at source 5, Hanistarot Lashem Elokeinu, that those things that are hidden belong to God. Here he's saying that those rewards for the mitzvot that we do that are non-apparent, v'aniglot lanu ulevanenu ad olam, and those things that are apparent are for us and for our families, liolam, for this world. I know that it gets translated forever. It could very okay. So the sixth idea, right? I want to get to the next piece. So if I'm going a little too quick, just stop me, okay? So the sixth idea is actually a little bit is a little bit esoteric. And that is when we are performing our mitzvot, when we accepted the Torah, it wasn't an employment contract, right? If we do this, then you must do that, right? In fact, Pirkei Avot tells us, Antigonos ish Soho kibel mishimon hatzadik, that Antigonos, the man from Soho, right? He says, Hu hayamer, al tiyu ka'avadim hamishamshim et harab al minat lekabel prat. Do not be like the servant who serves his master because he wants to get the reward. Ela havei ka'avadim hamishamshin et harab shelo al minat lekabel pras. Vayu mora shamayim alef. Rather, be like a servant who is doing it out of love of your master. And when you're doing things out of love of your master, and the prize and the reward is not so important, right? Then I don't have to deal with it. I just want you to be a Yirei Shammai. That the idea of a reward should not be your motivator. The idea of punishment should also not be your motivator. And so you got to ask yourself the question, why not? Right? We're asked to do the mitzvot. We're promised a reward. We should say, Magia li. I come with my little pincus and I say, this is everything I've done. Check, 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 check. Now I want what's coming to me. Why can't that be my motivation? And it's because the purpose of doing all of the mitzvot are a way to develop a loving relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? That's why we're doing it. That's the reward. Another reason, Ibn Pakuda says, is that the purpose of reward in Olam Haba is essentially clinging to God and drawing near to his supernal light. And no one can reach there except those who the Creator finds favor in, and the favor of the Creator is the root of the reward. Right? That don't look for specific things, because when you are in God's light, that's an amazing reward. Now, at the end of Masechet Tan, it talks about that in Olam HaEmet, that we're all at tzaddikim, right, are going to sit around in a circle, and they're going to bask in the ziv, in the glow of the Kodesh Baruch Hu. How many people here can tell me exactly what that means? Right? I mean, really, I don't know what that means. But if this is the reward for the tzaddikim, right, then, and this is the ultimate place we want to get to, and that's the reward for the mitzvot, how are you going to describe that in the Torah? Right? How are you going to really feel for what that means? In other words, it's the quality of our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu that's being rewarded. Right? He said, Ibn Bakuda said, he promised to the righteous man for her service, namely that he will pay reward to one who is fitting for it and mete out punishment to ones who deserve it. Meaning it's Hashem who determines who gets rewards and who gets punished, and we can't make the calculation. And if everybody's getting a separate and individual reward based on mitzvah or other performance, how are you going to put that in the Torah? He says it's hard to describe this idea. And he says it's not really hard to describe this idea. He says it's improper. Right? If you look at source 8, it is not proper for one to trust in his own deeds and assure himself that he will receive reward in this world and the next due to his good deeds. Rather, he should strive and exert himself to do good and to make efforts to thank God and be grateful for his constant kindnesses to him, and not be motivated by hope of future reward for his deeds, because you don't even know what those are. Rather, he should trust in God and try his best to pay his debt of gratitude for his great favors towards him, as our sages have said, and he quotes the Mishnah in Avot, do not be like servants who serve their master on conditions of receiving reward. Rather, be like servants who serve their masters without the condition of receiving reward, and let the fear of heaven be upon you. Just as a aside, we refer to Masechet Avot in two ways. We call it Masechet Avot, and we call it Pirkei Avot. Does anybody know why we do that? It's the 6-chapter syndrome. So Masechet Avot has 5 chapters. When you're talking about Masechet Avot, it's the first 5 chapters. They added another chapter, the 6th chapter, which are Braitot. They're not Mishnayot. And so if you're talking about Pirkei Avot, now I know everybody interchanges them, but if you're talking about Pirkei Avot, technically you're talking about the book with 6 chapters. If you're talking about Masechet Avot, you're talking about the book with 5 chapters. The 7th and final reason, where the Chovot HaLevavot, we have just done the 6th, is in terms of where we need to have and place our HaBitachon, is that Hashem, for his own reasons, and his desire to do chesed for us, that he will reward us beyond what we earned in this world. So, how do we do this? What do we need to do to show bitachon that we are going to receive greater reward? And it says in Sefer Devarim, Ki asher shamor tishmerun et kol mitzvot hazot. So if you faithfully execute all of these mitzvot, asher anochi mitzavcha hayom la'asotah, that I have commanded you to do. What is it that we need to do? One is lahavat et Hashem Elokechem. We have to have love for the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and lalechet b'chol drachav udavka bo, that we have to emulate him, and we have to cleave to him. Now, there is a wonderful sefer that maybe we'll learn called Tomer Devorah that gives instruction in terms of specific activities that we need to do to emulate the Kadosh Baruch Hu in this world, and how can we be like him? What Ibn Pakuda says here is that you need to readjust your priorities in this world and to focus ultimately on what's important. And he says that there's a continuum of choices that we have, right? On the one side is 100% gashmiut, right? Living in this world only for the physical pleasures that this world gives us. On the other end of the spectrum, right, is living in this world only for ruchniut, right? Having no connections whatsoever in terms of gashmiut, and denouncing the illusions of this world for the spirituality of the next. Now, no one should live on the 100% gashmiut side And no one in this world, at least, can live on the 100% Ruchnius side. But what we have to do is we have to live our lives moving ourselves along the continuum until we find that spot where we can be more Ruchniut than we are Gashmiut. And as we move along this continuum, we show our bitachon in the Kodesh Baruch Hu that this is what he wants. And this is where, because of his delight in this and his chesed to us, we will receive Shaar. Right? And we have to have bitachon that will take place. And specifically, Ibn Pakuda says that this entails shunning or deprioritizing world pleasures, replacing love of material things with love of God, delighting in him. He says these are the ways of tzaddikim. Right? When we look at the things that we acquire in the world that we live in, we ask ourselves, are they really worth it? Right? There's an adage that they say nobody said on their deathbed, I wish I spent more time at work. Right? That there are more important things in this world than simply acquisition. That doesn't mean acquisition is bad. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive and do your best and create, but you have to have priorities in terms of what's important, what isn't, especially when you come to decision points. Right? And he says that people who are further down the continuum, right, who are at a high spiritual level, he says that you can tell them by certain noteworthy characteristics. One is they're not just happy doing what they are doing, but they want to share what they're doing, encouraging other people to move along the continuum as well. Right? They show great patience in most circumstances because they have this level of bitachon, and they consider everything unimportant when compared to doing God's will and to strive to be like him. So we now come to a pop quiz that he gives us. Okay, a pop quiz in the U.S. is the teacher will come in and say, okay, class, we're taking a test today. Everybody groans, right? That's what a pop quiz is. So he gives us a pop quiz, right? We said at the beginning of the shiur that the goal of these shiurim is to learn, right? To grow spiritually and come closer to the Borei Olam. That means at the end of the day, we need to reflect upon where we stand. And the Chovot HaLevavot will ask us to do this many times over the course of the Sefer. And in fact, he has an entire Shaar, an entire treatise dedicated to something called Cheshbon HaNefesh, soul searching, to see where we stand. And there he gives us 30 different ways. So here, Ibn Pakuda is a little bit more gentle with us. And since we are really at the beginning of the book, he just tells us what it looks like if somebody is a Baal Bitachon and what it looks like if somebody is not. So what we need to do is we need to ask ourselves, which picture are we closer to? Right? So we have a baseline from which to start on our journey. And as we know, he is a great list maker, Rabbeinu Bachya, and he gives us 7 characteristics of a Baal Bitachon. And the opposite, most of us, certainly me, fall somewhere in the middle. And we fall in the middle because it is very, very, very difficult to really be a Baal Bitachon. So let me give you his first example. He says, one who trusts in God, accepts his judgment in all matters, and thanks him for the good as well as the bad. Right, so that shouldn't come as any surprise to us, because that's our mantra. Again, everything emanates from the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and everything is part of his plan. Everything he does has our best interests at heart, and he knows what's best for us. So once a month, I speak in Dor Hemshech downstairs here, and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, and I brought in the idea of bitachon, and I brought in this mantra. Somebody came up to me after shul, and he said that he couldn't accept it. He said he couldn't accept, after what happened on October 7th, that there was any good in it, or that what happened around the world is good. And I will be honest with you, it is hard to argue with him, right? But it's also hard to argue to see what good is taking place with a 30-year-old mother of 3 who's dying of cancer, right? I don't think the job is to be Pollyanna-ish and to see only roses. It's to have the conviction that these 3 statements are true. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is in charge. He knows what he's doing. He has our best interest in heart, even if it is not readily apparent to us, and even if it never becomes apparent to us. A while back, I brought the following story about Rabbi Akiva, right, in Masechet Brachot. So I'll just read the English, although you have the Aramaic there. It says, like this incident, when Rabbi Akiva was walking along the road and he came to a certain city, he inquired about lodging and they did not give him any. So what he was doing was he was on the run from the Romans. And the Romans had him on their most wanted list, and he looked for sanctuary in the city. And they said, of all the things we don't want you. And they sent him out, right? But Rabbi Akiva had his own mantra, which is Kol da'avid rachmana letava av. Everything that God does is ultimately for the good. Now, that means that even if bad things happen, the outcome will eventually be good, right? So he went to sleep in a field, and he had with him a rooster, a donkey, and a candle. That's it. So remember, the reason he had a candle, it was a lit candle, and probably a torch, because nobody had lighters and nobody had matches and no streetlights. So you walked around with a lit torch with you. So a gust of wind came and extinguished the torch. The cat came and ate the rooster, and the lion came and ate the donkey. They didn't say whether he was in the Tanya, because there's certainly no lack of cats. He said, Kol da'avid rachmana letava, right? Everything that God does is ultimately good. That night, an army patrol came looking for him, and they took the city into captivity. And he said to them, didn't I tell you, everything that God does, he does for the best. So the Romans came in and they killed everybody in the city because they didn't believe that they wouldn't give him sanctuary. And Rabbi Akiva, who was out in the field, he was saved. But the net message is that the bitachon we need to have in the Kadosh Baruch Hu is the realization that not everything that happens to us is good, and bad things happen, but they are ultimately for our good, even if we can't see it or understand it. But at least according to this story, the next morning, when he saw what had transpired and how these bad things were really good things, he got to understand immediately why bad things happen. Sometimes we never get that opportunity to understand what good comes out of things. So here I have a confession to make. I know that's their religion, right? But I have a confession to make. I sometimes hesitate to bring instances from Chazal as examples or as proof to point. And the reason is they're very hard for us to relate to. Chazal seems so much bigger than life. And plus these incidents took place so long ago, we often dismiss them and say, well, that's okay for Rabbi Akiva or his teacher Nachum Gamzu. And sometimes we don't even believe that they happen, right? That they're just stories that we can tell children at night. So I want to bring a story of what bitachon looks like in a more contemporary setting. So I heard this story from my Rosh Kollel, a Rav Simcha Ariel, who told a story the other day about a relative of his. So his wife's relative was a famous Rav, Rav Shmuel Yosef Rabinov, who was a massive Talmud Chacham in Europe before the war, and he went to London. He was on the last boat out of Dunkirk, and he became a Rav in Stamford Hill. And in 1959, he retired, and he made Aliyah, and he moved to Bnei Brak. So one day in Bnei Brak, while crossing the street, he was hit by a car, and he was hospitalized for some time. At the trial of the driver, the prosecutor asked Rabinov, "Do you recognize this man?" pointing to the driver. And he said, "No." He said, "Well, this is the man that put you in the hospital." And he said, "No." He said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "It wasn't him, it was him." He said, "The fact that this man broke the law and the fact that he has to be punished for what he did, that has nothing to do with me, right? I was put into the hospital because of what the Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted for me." That's a HaBitachon. And they exist in this world. The worldview on the other side is that I am totally responsible for my own success, right? And kochi va'otzim yadi asali et ha'chayil hazeh, right? I've done this with my own strength and my own abilities. And although he doesn't cite this, he cites this example, the other side of Hashem is in charge of everything is life is just random, right? There's no order or seder or reason. Things just happen, right? That's what the other side of, or the other mirror looks like, right? So that's litmus test one. That's the first picture we're supposed to look at. The second litmus test is what we said in the beginning of our discussions of bitachon, that the bellwether of somebody who is a Baal bitachon is serene, right? He's peaceful of soul, right? He is menufat nefesh. Anxiety is a sign that one still has work to do on his bitachon. What Chovot HaLevavot says is one who does not trust in God, even when he is prosperous, is always pained and in the state of continual anxiety. He is saddened and grieving because he is little satisfied with his situation. He yearns to augment, increase, and hoard in, and likewise in bad times, because he is disgusted by it, and it is contrary to his desires, natures, and traits. So we have to ask ourselves, how anxious do we feel? And if we feel anxious, which is certainly common in our world today, we need to reflect on the source of that anxiety, and maybe we need to work on our bitachon to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Well, so the question is, where's the line between anxiety and hishtadlut? And I think that there's no line at all, because hishtadlut is what we need to do, and anxiety comes because we think we're in charge of it, right? It is our attitude. We have to take care of what we need to take care of, but if ultimately we know that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is in charge and we're going to do it and it's going to work out what is good for us, even though it might not feel that way, that takes away the anxiety, doesn't take away the obligation to do stuff. So that's how I would see those two things. So litmus test 3, the third picture we need to look at, has to do with a topic that he brings up a lot, which is our relationship to earning a living and money in general, and then reinforcing what we learned before. One who trusts in the Kadosh Baruch Hu is serene about his sources of income, or at a minimum does not ascribe it to who he's working for or what he is doing, because they are just intermediaries for shluchim of the Borei Olam. And all thanks for what we have goes to him. And if things don't play out, it's the Kadosh Baruch Hu who is in charge. And if that means that that my efforts don't yield any benefits, I know that something else will happen if I keep up my hishtadlut, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu, poteach et yadecha masbir lekul chayratzon, he will provide for all of his creatures. He also says that, and I can't relate to this at all, and I don't even know what the words mean. So he says, if you have a surplus of money, right? I guess that's Bill Gates. But he says, meaning if you have more than you need, then you have to ask yourself the question, why do you have more than you need? Why did the Kadosh Baruch Hu provide you with things that you don't need? So clearly, Kadosh Baruch Hu's job is to give you what you need. And if you have more, then you've got it for a reason. So he says, one who trusts in God, if he has more money than he needs, he will spend it in a way that pleases the Kadosh Baruch Hu, tzedakah, charity, etc. With a generous spirit and a good heart, as it is written in Divrei Yamim, it says, everything is yours, and from your hand we have given to you. In other words, again, if you look at your needs, and that's a very personal, individual thing, and you find that you have excess capital, then you say, oh, he must have given it to me for a reason. What is the reason? It's probably so that I can do what he wants me to do with it. And you have to look to see how to invest his money. And if you understand it's his money, then how you give it is going to be what do I care, right? I can be generous, I can be kind, because it's not mine to begin with. So if you want to test yourself, think about what is your attitude when somebody deserving comes and asks you for tzedakah. Right? Is it that you're giving with an open hand, or at least with a generous spirit and a smile? Or does it feel more like an imposition? Right? Does it feel like, oh, I can't believe I have to put my hand in my pocket again? I mean, these are the questions as they come up that we have to ask ourselves, and then we have to say, well, why is that? Right? Is it that I need to work on my HaBitachon? So the last category that he brings is not the amount of parnasa he gives you, but how. What profession should you choose? Meaning, what is your priority? Is it money or life or lifestyle? So a Baal Bitachon will choose a profession according to the Chovot HaLevavot in order, right? There's a quote, in order to prepare provisions for his end. Meaning to allow him to do mitzvot and his needs for appointed time, or his appointed home, which is an olam haba, only a means of livelihood which is clear to him that it is safe for fulfilling the Torah study and fulfilling his religious service, will he engage in it. So in the Tanya, this was a number of years ago, I paid a shiva call to somebody in the neighborhood. And it was in the middle of the day, so it was only the Avelim, which were 3 boys, and me. So when I pay a shiva call, one of the things that I like to do is I say, what is a signature story you can tell me about, in this case, your father? But a signature story is a story that I would be able to really understand who the individual was. So I heard the following story. The father apparently was a construction manager. He was in construction in England, of course, and he was just on the derech to becoming from. During this period of transition, he got a job offer in South America for a huge amount of money, and the job that he always wanted. The condition was he had to work 7 days a week. Right? That's a very, very real choice. And he decided that he was Shomer Shabbat, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu would take care of him in another way, and he turned down the job. That's what a Baal Bitachon looks like, right? That they make their choices in a way that it allows you to live the life that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is asking us to do. He also says that the relationship of a Baal Bitachon to those around him are different than the relationship of somebody who is not Baal Bitachon. Here's what he says, that a Baal Bitachon, they feel at ease with him, that's the person who has Bitachon in Hashem, because they feel secure that he will not harm them, and their hearts are at peace with regard to him. They are not afraid of him that he will take their wives or their money. He's also not worried about them because he realized that it is not in any created being's power to control or to benefit or harm him. Therefore, he does not fear harm from them, nor expects any benefits from them. And since he is assured from them that they are assured from him, he will love them and they will love him. Okay, so what is this talking about? When we have relationships to people, oftentimes the motivations are, what can they do for me? Or what can they do in competition to me? If I have no reason to need anything from them, because I know everything comes from the Kadosh Baruch Hu, it means that our relationship can be on an even keel, can be on an even level. You don't need to worry about me. I'm not here to take anything from you, because whatever you have, the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave you. Whatever I have, the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave me. So we're coming up to Shavuot. And perhaps the weirdest one of the commandments is don't covet. Right? Don't covet. So all of the Mefarshim wonder, what is that? Because these are capital crimes, right? Murder, kidnapping, all those things are capital crimes. So why is it that coveting is bad? Why? I mean, why is that a capital crime? And so some people say it says because it leads to theft. I'm going to want your thing and I'm going to steal it. But stealing isn't a capital crime, right? You pay it back. You pay a fine. Right? So what is this idea of coveting? Idea of coveting is that the Kadosh Baruch Hu, I believe, got it wrong. You have your stuff, the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave you your stuff, but I really should have gotten it. Right? And therefore, I want your stuff because God was. And that's the opposite of a Baal Bitachon. Right? You have your stuff. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave that to you. Baruch Hashem, he gave me my stuff, right? In its completeness. And there's no competition. And if there's no competition, then there's no reason for people to be anything but friendly and kind. Right? And he says that is one of the outcomes. So we have many places in that in Chazal and in the Torah that tell us that we can't worry about the future. If you're a Baal Bitachon, you're not going to worry about the future because you're not in charge of the future. The Mishlei, the proverb says, Al tehalel bayom machar, ki lo teda ma yiled yom. Don't boast about tomorrow because you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Right? All you know is what you have today and the mitzvot and the obligations you have today and tomorrow. The Kadosh Baruch Hu. So what a Baal Bitachon needs to ask themselves is, will I be ready? Am I ready for what's going to happen or what might happen tomorrow? So he writes the following. Rather, his worry and mourning is on his lack in the fulfillment of his obligations to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. and he tries to make up as much as he can of them, of his external actions and internal duties of the heart, because he thinks of his death and the arrival of the day of the ingathering, and the fear that death may come suddenly increases his efforts and zeal to prepare provisions for his end. And he won't be concerned about preparing for this world. And this is what is said in Avot. It says, repent one day before you die in order for you to make tshuva. So why? And then they say, obviously, well, how do you know what day you're going to die? So repent every day. Every day, make sure you're ready. They say a Talmud Chacham should always be dressed in clean clothes and white. Right? And we need to, I used to live in Queens, New York. And across the street was a fellow by the name of Marty. He owned a fruit stand. And Marty was from Montreal. Marty was the hardest working person I ever met. His fruit stand was open 7:24. So I came home, and it was Friday afternoon, and Marty's closing up the store. I said, Marty, what are you doing? You getting firm on me now? He says, time to smooth out the road. Right? I mean, we all have to smooth out the road. We also have to have a view to the room. We'll stop here, unless you have questions, comments. And next time, we will finish Shaar HaBitachon, and we will start the new Shaar.